Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I am the Doug Cannon.
On this week's show, we look at a few potential contenders that are flying under the radar and enjoy life in the 24/7 era.
It's unfortunate, but it's necessary. We will also be looking at this week's suspensions and whether or not the hits to the head will slowly decline in the NHL.
All that and more. Let's drop the puck on episode 27. Episode 27 is here alongside Doug Cannon. I am Luke Lipinski. The possibilities are endless here, Doug, with episode number 27.
Oh, you have no idea.
I really don't.
How is your Sunday, Luke?
My Sunday is good. Everything's a blur. As you heard, I almost mispronounced my own name. So this should be a fun show for all.
This is going to be a great show. Wake up, buddy.
Fantastic. Best number 27 of all time?
Oh, come on. Frank Mahovlich.
Scott Niedermayer, Hall of Famer.
No.
Yes.
Frank Mahovlich.
He's a Hall of Famer. How about this one? You weren't ready for this one. Jeremy Roenick when he was on the Blackhawks.
No way.
Well, he's not the best, but he's one of the best.
Daryl Sittler.
Jeremy Roenick on the Blackhawks.
I told you there was going to be some prestigious Maple Leafs mentioned in this show. And I just named to him Frank Mahovlich. Come on. Frank Mahovlich.
No, I have no problem with Mr. Frank. But was that
Daryl Sittler?
Is that what you teased from last week?
Yes.
Okay, because I've been wondering for 7 days what was going to happen.
Daryl Sittler. 10 points in one game.
That's a very impressive game.
Nobody's ever come close. The Rocket.
Guys have come close, right?
The Rocket had 8.
Okay.
He beat the Rockets' record.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever going to put up 10 in a game.
10 in a game. I don't think that's going to happen.
Didn't Sam Gagner do 8 a couple of years ago? I think 2 years ago he did 8.
But think about it. Mahovlich. He played 13 seasons with Toronto, 4 with Detroit, 4 with Montreal, 2 with the Toronto Toros in the WHA, 2 with the Birmingham Bulls. He played 237 games in the WHA, and he played 1,181 games in the NHL.
And he played for Toronto and Detroit, so he could play against himself in the alumni game.
And Montreal.
Wow.
Yeah, he could play against himself in the Winter Classic.
See?
Yeah, but my 227's got to be Frank Mahovlich, got to be Daryl Sittler.
Fine. Next week I'm not even going to ask.
Why?
Because I only like the game if I'm winning each time.
You're the one that brought this game up.
Yeah, it's a good game. All right, so let's get into it.
Okay.
I guess we'll start with Sean Thornton since that's where we started last week.
Yeah, let's continue the suspension theme. I'm all for that.
15-game suspension.
Not enough.
Really? I feel that way, but again, as I said last time, maybe I'm skewed because of the teams that were involved. Although I have nothing against Boston. I like the Bruins, but I just thought it was it was not a hockey play. It's not during the actual course of play, so you can't say there was any sort of luck factor or just, stuff you can't control. I mean, some of these hits, and we're going to talk about them because there was
a bunch.
6 more suspensions this week in the NHL.
The thing I don't like about the Sean Thornton incident is, A, it wasn't a hockey play. B, it was extremely, extremely dangerous. He could have caused a lot of damage with what he did. In 15 games, I'm sorry, that's just not enough. And I think it was last night I was talking to you about it. You look at the Raffi Torres suspension for his open ice hit, which I didn't think was a dirty hit at all. I mean, I understood where the league was coming from on the hit.
I was fine with that being a suspension for Raffi Torres, especially what we're seeing suspended now. But for him to get 25 games...
during a hockey game, during a hockey play.
During the playoffs. That's where he was 25 games.
Right.
So really, if you do the math, what is it supposed to be? 2 for... if some people would say that's a 50-game regular season suspension because there's that theory that every game you get suspended in the playoffs is worth 2 in the regular season.
So then Thornton gets the 15, and I don't see the balance there. Orpik could have gotten seriously hurt.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
Seriously?
He could have got hurt.
Well, yeah, he did get hurt.
I mean, really, really bad. I mean, they're lucky that he's just got a concussion.
Yeah, I got a couple of different questions for you.
Sure.
One, if he gets hurt worse, and I don't know how they would necessarily quantify that in this instance. I guess he was skating with the Penguins a little bit on Friday. I don't know if that helped Thornton's case or what. Is the suspension worse? Or if he's not hurt at all, is the suspension somehow lower?
No, I can't look at it that way. My whole mindset was it had nothing to do with the game.
No, I agree. I
Nothing
completely agree.
to do with the game. And I just, to go after him the way he went after him and to jeopardize his career, throwing a guy down on the ice, it just takes the head to hit the wrong way.
Well, you talk about a league that's doing everything they can to prevent head injuries. So while a guy's not looking, you go right for his head and then keep going for his head and then keep hitting him in the head. Like, I don't know when this ever seemed like a good idea.
I mean, 99.9% of the time, if you see any kind of a melee or a fight during a hockey game, if a guy goes down, the guy that's on top pulls off.
Yeah, because there's a hockey code. Here's where Thornton. I don't even want to play devil's advocate because I pretty much completely agree with you on this. But people comparing the two hits will say, well, Raffi Torres had a history, which, as I went into great detail last week, I don't care because a history is. I can see the history more for the Torres hit because you're saying this guy has done this before he crosses the line, so that's why we're going to suspend him. I thought 25 games was ridiculously excessive, but I get what they were trying to do, and that was right at the beginning of all these suspensions. So they were really trying to prove a point. So I can accept that. The Thornton one, though, like you're saying, there's no luck involved. It wasn't like this was out of his control. It wasn't like Orpik was carrying the puck and crossed at the blue line just as he was going to hit him, and all he could do was hit him in the head. It wasn't that at all. It was completely premeditated.
It wasn't going into the corner and a guy turned on me. There was none of that. It was, the best word is premeditated.
Yeah.
So I didn't think 15 games was enough for Mr. Thornton.
What'd you think he was going to get? I thought he was going to get about 15 games.
I thought he was going to get 20 plus.
Okay.
I really did. And I was kind of disappointed when he didn't.
When it all first happened, and that still, if you watch the replay and you know Brooks Orpik's fine now, it makes you sick to your stomach to watch it.
Here's the thing. When stuff like this happens, we hear the battle cry, no more fighting in hockey, which I think is a ridiculous battle cry. But what hockey does need to get rid of is the goonery. And that was goonery at its finest. And that has no place in the game. I'm sorry.
I agree.
I don't mind a scuffle. I don't mind emotions getting hot and furious and all the rest of it. But the goonery, bye-bye.
Well, fighting, the reason it's in the game, and people that actually have played or follow hockey closely understand this, that the fighting's in the game to police the game because the officials can only do so much. And so if a game's getting out of hand, you throwing some guy that barely ever plays into the box for 2 minutes only is going to do so much, and it's only going to do it for 2 minutes. Whereas if teams are getting out of control and players are starting to kind of get out of whack during a game, you send your two guys out that are there that fight. I mean, that's one of their main roles. That's not their primary role anymore. And those guys can kind of take care of things, or you can deliver a good, clean hit to take care of things. But this is not policing the game. This is going the complete opposite direction. This is making it worse.
Yeah, and a lot of times, though, I think that fighting itself is decreasing on its own because guys are you'll see a little scuffle and there'll be a verbal exchange and the message is sent during that scuffle. No punches were thrown or anything. It was sent. And I think with the league doing what the league's doing right now, guys have got to learn that those hits aren't going to be tolerated. And so I think if you just follow the path that they're on, it'll correct itself. But the goonery, gotta go. I don't have patience for it because that's all it is. It's a guy that can't play. John Scott is like, dude, you're only there because you're big and you can hurt people. And I just don't have a place for a player like that. He's taken, as far as I'm concerned, he's taken up a roster spot of some talent down in the AHL.
Yeah, and to that point, I don't think that those guys are going to be there much longer because eventually teams are going to realize the teams that are winning the Stanley Cup are bringing up the talented guy from the AHL instead of that guy. I mean, look at the teams that have won lately.
Right.
I mean, the Bruins won with Sean Thornton, but prior to this, he didn't really have any history of this kind of stuff. But this crossed so many lines. So the question for you now is, does 15 games, does that deter people from doing this in the future?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the whole point, right? You're trying to send a message. Well, what message did you send?
You don't want to miss 15 games. You don't want to lose that money, but I don't know if in the heat of the moment, if somebody else, the Tampa Bay equivalent to Sean Thornton is in this situation,
right?
next season. It's not going to happen this week, obviously, because it's
No.
fresh in everybody's mind. But next season, does that guy stop? Does he think, well, 15 games?
Right.
I don't know. It's like we said last week. There's only so much the league can do. 15 games. It's about what I expected. When James Neal got 5, though, I started to think Thornton might get a ton of games.
Yeah, and then last week we talked about Dion Phaneuf's hit in the corner on Miller, right?
Kevin Miller, yeah, of Boston. Boston's at the center of everything.
2 games, which I thought was appropriate.
We're starting to see some consistency there.
Right.
That's kind of what, because just going through this week real quick, Neal got the 5 games to start it off. Dion Phaneuf got 2. Jared Cowan got 2 for a hit to the head. Richard Panik of Tampa Bay got 2 games for boarding. David Clarkson, has he played any games yet for Toronto?
He's been. This will be 12 games now.
2 games for a hit to the head. So it seems like if it's your first offense and you're hitting somebody in the head, you're getting 2 games. And that's 6 suspensions in a week. That's a lot.
That's a lot. And the great thing about it is the league is not taking their foot off the gas pedal. They've clearly said, we're not going to tolerate it. And as long as you guys are doing it, you're going to be not playing. You're going to be sitting up in the press box in a suit and tie watching your teammates and not helping your team. So not only do you not get to play, you're financially burdened because you're missing the pay for those games that you're out, and you're hurting your team. So now what's happening is the message is these hits are becoming selfish because you're not thinking of your team. And a good example of what we talked about last week was you and I were at the Phoenix Coyotes Carolina game last night, and a young defenseman, Connor Murphy, went into the corner, and he was getting ready to put a check, and he pulled up because the guy turned on him.
Yeah, it was a weird play, and you go back and watch it a couple different ways. I mean, it was the sort of play that you don't even notice if you're watching the game, really. He goes behind the net with Jordan Stahl. Jordan Stahl, it looked like, kind of got just caught up in the net or whatever, slipped just a little bit as he was going to hit him. And so maybe it was accidental. I don't know. I mean, we didn't ask him after the game. Maybe we should have. But to your point, it really looked like he tried to pull off because he saw the numbers. And so let's just assume for a second that's what he was trying to do. Connor Murphy's a guy that has played, I think, 9 NHL games.
Right.
So of all the guys that probably feel like they need to prove themselves and deliver a hit whenever it is, from behind to see the numbers or whatever, if he's already committed to the hit, you would think it's a guy that's played 9 games that's trying to just stay in the league. And yet he was able to pull off. So guys are able to do it. He's not the only example.
Well, and we talked about this last week, and I think that, Connor's a young player. You're seeing the beginning of it. And you look at all the young players behind him, the U14s, the U16s, the U18s that are starting to come through the system that are going to, have aspirations to make the big show. You're seeing what they're being taught. You see numbers, you pull up. And you made the point last night, when he did that, Carolina didn't score.
No. It was behind the Coyotes' net, so it was right there, but the puck went away and they got it out of the zone.
You just control it over there in the corner a different way.
If you hit them from behind, you're taking a 2-minute penalty and they're in your zone for 2 minutes.
Right.
And depending on who you are, you're, like you said, you're being selfish because you're hurting your team, because if you're a key player, and we've seen key players get suspended this year too. It's not just the John Scotts and the Sean Thorntons of the world. Dion Phaneuf is a key player. James Neal's a big-time player for Pittsburgh. Guy scored 40 goals. So, especially if you're a player like that, I like that there isn't, or at least there does not appear to be, a double standard.
No.
It's not like, oh, well, you hit him in the head, but you scored 30 goals last year, so we'll look the other way.
No, that's not happening. And that's, you got to give credit to Shanahan for that at the league level, because they look at pretty much on the merit of the hit. They might see it a little differently than you or I or other people, but they're fairly consistent. They're doing a hard job, but I think it's great because I'm going to bring it back to my world as a youth coach. Any kind of a head contact in youth hockey right now, and under USA Hockey rules, is a 2 and a 10. So you get 2 minutes for the hit, the infraction, then you get a 10-minute on top of it. So now at the youth level, and here's where I'm going with this, at the youth level, you are really being selfish. If you go in and you stupidly hit somebody from behind, or you board them, or you charge them, or if there's any kind of head contact, it's a 2 and a 10. That means you're out for 12 minutes. And if you're any kind of a performer for your club, you've just hurt your team.
Even if you're not, 12 minutes, it just throws all the lines off. Defensive pairings, wherever you play.
There's a snowball effect, absolutely. But I think these younger guys are learning that. So if they're lucky enough to get to the peak level of the NHL or even the AHL, then I think you're going to see all this stuff decline. I really do.
Decline's a good way to put it, because I don't think it'll ever be gone, because it is hockey, and sometimes it's unavoidable. But I think that what you're seeing, and there's the people that panic and they're like, oh, we're not going to see hits anymore. You're still going to see hits, but instead of it where it was even just a couple years ago of I'm on the ice and I want the puck and whatever it takes, 100%. If I have to go through that guy's face or whatever, I'm taking the puck. Now there's at least going to be a mindset, and it's going to take a while to put in there. Like you said, you have to start with the younger guys too that grow into it. There's going to be a mindset of I want the puck no matter what it takes, but the head's off limits. That's all we're going to see. That's the change, but that's all you need. We're not trying to take hitting out of the game.
No, you're never going to take hitting out of the game, and a good shoulder-to-shoulder check is a beautiful thing to watch, and it's effective as part of the game. I mean, checking in the sport of hockey is there for a reason, and you'll never get rid of that. You just don't target the head. So big guys like Chara, who else? Martin Hansel in the Phoenix Coyotes roster. They're just going to have to adjust their game a little bit when they go up against a smaller player. Chara coming in on Ray Whitney. He's going to have to adjust.
Yeah. That is in a weird way a disadvantage for the bigger guy.
Yep.
Which you would think, being the biggest guy out there, should be nothing but advantageous. But there is a little bit.
There is a downside to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Real quick, Derek England hits Justin Abdelkader on Saturday night. Abdelkader looks like he's out of the lineup, and Derek England, I'm guessing, will get something for this. He has a 3-game suspension on his NHL resume, as they put it already. Where would you put that on your NHL resume? Like right next to your name and some.
Here's my list of suspensions.
Very nice, calming font. So I don't know. We may see that, and the Penguins lost other players. We'll get into that more later on, but. That is our weekly quota of suspension talk.
You're listening to the Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
Segment 2, the B block, as they call it in TV. This is not TV.
This is not TV.
But if you were filming this, I don't know why you would, it would be the B block. 24/7 started this week, finally, last night.
It was awesome.
I bet it was. I haven't seen it.
Oh, dude, so spoiler alert.
What? Don't tell me what teams are in it. That'll ruin everything.
The opening scene.
I did see the opening scene.
With the kids in their hockey bags.
I watched it at 3 in the morning, and I was like, I'll just watch the opening scene. And then I was like, I'm going to stay up.
What a phenomenal setup. I was just like...
That was such a Doug Cannon scene. I saw that, and I was like, somewhere Doug loves this scene.
It was just great. The kids in their bags going to the local outdoor rink.
The outdoor rink did look fun.
And the best part is they're playing shinny hockey. They just put their shin pads over their jeans, right? Elbow pads over their sweater, put on a lid, and go.
Just hockey.
Just hockey.
No suspensions.
And
no CBA, none of that. Just hockey.
And I didn't really, really, really realize how much I missed that series from last year until I got to sit down last night and watch it. And I'm like, this was a key thing that was missing out of my life last year.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. Last year, as the work stoppage was going, and it looked like we might get into the new year, which at the time was 2013. Everybody was screaming that they wanted hockey, and I was too. But I was that guy on the other side screaming, "I want 24/7. So you guys better film something. Just film 24/7 of the lockout. I don't care. Just film 24/7."
And it was really, especially for me because Toronto's one of them. Mm-hmm. So they have a shot of Dion Phaneuf in his car going to the rink. And they have this long shot of the road that he's on. And in the distance is the CN Tower. And then I'm like, I used to live there.
In the tower?
Yeah, the very top.
That's the way you roll.
Rapunzel, throw down your hair.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch it yet, which is... Well, on the one hand, I feel bad for myself. On the other hand, you've already seen it. I still have that unopened present to watch the second I get out of here.
Well, and the great thing for me this year, though, is my wife is from the Detroit area. So she goes, oh, I used to eat there. The car drives by and it shows a landmark restaurant or something. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm seeing scenes from downtown Toronto. I'm seeing the ACC Center, which at one point used to be a Canada Post building.
Wow. Okay.
Where it's located, where
Yeah.
they built the new rink.
Yeah.
Of course, when I lived in Toronto, it was Maple Leaf Gardens, which is nowhere near the ACC Center.
No.
So, yeah, what they did was they tore down the old Canada Post building, and they saved some of the outside structure. So some of the history of the original building on that footprint's still there.
That's cool.
I thought that was cool.
Let me ask you this. How did they portray the city of Detroit?
They were honest.
Okay.
They said, here's a city that, is in bankruptcy and is trying to get back, but they love their hockey. They just love their hockey.
They didn't shoot it from like creative angles where it looked like the land of Oz or something and everything was made of gold.
No. I mean, it was very real.
Okay.
And
Which I think is important because that's kind of that mentality is embodied in that fan base now. So you have to tell the story accurately, which no shock that 24/7 has done that. I mean, that's the whole point of that show.
Yeah, I mean, it was just so much fun to come home last night, get all the kiddos in bed, get the bowl of popcorn, and I'm going, here we go.
The first year, this is the third season that they've done this, I think. The first year, everybody was shocked by how much Bruce Boudreau was creative with his language. Is it even noticeable anymore? I mean, I know it's not Boudreau, but is it noticeable?
There was only a couple of times there was a couple of incidents on ice. The players were mic'd.
Yeah.
And a couple of creative adverbs and adjectives floated out. But it wasn't, there was one.
Not so big.
There was one word that flew out, and I went, oh.
Like, I have to save that word for
and I'm like,
special occasion.
I'm like, it was in the heat of a moment. It was players tussling on the ice, and that in the heat of the battle, certain verbiage is going to be used, and hockey is not the only sport that it happens in.
Looking back, I'm now kind of shocked that A, John Tortorella let them film him in the locker room talking, and B, he didn't say something that got like HBO shut down by the FCC somehow.
You know what shocked me last night?
No.
Was Mike Babcock. And you know how close to the vest he likes to keep things.
Yeah.
He's not a big sharer. And he's very calculated in how he answers questions and what information he gives you. And he comes in, and it was brief, but when he addressed the team in the room, he's actually on the whiteboard showing them, I want this done, this team does this, so I want you to do this. And I'm like, oh, he's sharing on camera.
Yeah, he probably – I wonder what those production meetings are like, because for Hard Knocks, they were allowed to kind of have a representative of the team say, you've got to cut this out, and you've got to cut this out. And that's great that you guys filmed it. We understand the cameras are rolling all the time, but you've got to cut these out. They're not seeing the light of day. And what's different about Hard Knocks, I mean, it's essentially the same show, but they've been doing it in a way of which team wants us to come along. And, there's 3 teams that want us there and want the publicity. We're going to pick which of the 3 we think will make best TV. And now it's getting to the point where NFL teams are like, all right, we don't want you around. And the NFL is saying you have to because it's so successful. We'll just pick a team. The NHL has kind of had the luxury or maybe just the foresight to say, hey, you 2 teams, you get to play in the Winter Classic. You have no recourse here. And it's good for these 2 teams. Like Toronto and Detroit get a ton of exposure, but they don't have a choice.
I'm sure there's personnel from both teams or the league saying, look, don't use that. Don't use that. I'm 100% positive that goes on. But you're right. You guys are in a Winter Classic, and you guys can now have cameras in your locker room.
Yeah. And the players, I'm sure, love it.
Well, and that's the thing I love about 24/7 is that, like David Clarkson, he's from the Toronto area, so they sit down and they talk to him, and
because he's not playing, so he has time to sit down.
sit down. But he's like, this is why I came to Toronto. I mean, so you get to understand him a little bit. It wasn't, it's a great city. I mean, it was a little bit more human, the one-on-one and playing, and why guys like Cleary on Detroit decided to stay in Detroit.
Oh, he wanted to stay there so badly.
And he had an offer to go somewhere else, but he wanted to play for Detroit.
And it didn't look like he was going to. Remember, we talked about this over the summer. They just didn't have cap room or roster room, and somehow they made that work.
And they made it work, and that's where he wanted to be, and the one-on-ones is what I love. I mean, I love seeing the human side of these guys and being with their families, and it's just – and hockey players are so great, man.
Well, that kind of ties into what I liked about this show, and I really can't wait to watch it now. And next week we're going to have 2 episodes to really recap. But I like that other players watch it. Like, you see other players interviewed around the league leading up to this, and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm definitely going to watch it. Like, either I know a guy on that team, and so, I just want to be able to call him and make fun of him after the episode airs or whatever. But even if they don't know him, they're still watching it because it's done so well, and hockey players care about hockey, and they care about what's going on around the league and just that life, the hockey lifestyle.
Well, and it also gets to show the casual fan, like, or even the hardcore fan, like Joffrey Lupul was out hurt at the beginning, and it showed him rehabbing, and you could hear the frustration in his voice that he just wanted to play.
Yeah.
I feel great. I want to go. He's out there with the skating coach, and I feel great. I feel great. I feel great. But I got to wait for the coach and the trainers to let me play.
You and I are lucky because we have incredible access to NHL teams and players. And I will say this, even with the access that we have, there's been stuff on that show that even we haven't seen before. Like, they get so far behind the scenes.
Right. I mean, they go into the players' lounge. I mean, you think the locker room is a sanctuary?
Yeah.
The players good luck getting in the players' lounge.
Yeah.
So, I mean, first episode, I'm a very happy guy, and I will be watching it again tonight before I go to bed.
So it did not disappoint at all on any level. The expectations are so high; it's tough to live up sometimes to the expectations.
They didn't let down at all.
Let's quickly transition, because we did say last week we were going to do this. Look at I think we each have one team from each conference that we're going to look at as teams that are just kind of flying under the radar. And at least with my teams, I'm not saying these guys are dark horses to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
But I just think that I know we haven't talked about them really much on this show. They're not the bottom feeders like Edmonton that we seem to talk about a lot.
That's my men's league team.
And that's and they're not the very top teams. It's not
who
Chicago
you played
or
for
Pittsburgh.
At one point.
Yeah, I played like 4 games. And now one of my teams has Oilers jersey. So look at that. It all tied together. And we're better than the Oilers. Yeah, we're not talking about the bottom teams or the top teams like we've usually been talking about. Middle.
Let's start in the bottom conference and go to the East.
Boy, real quickly on that, I don't have the exact record in front of me, but it was a couple days ago. I told you this yesterday at the game. The West record against the East, 118, 50, and 20.
That's unbelievable.
That was going into Friday night, and there was a couple games, and obviously there was a ton on Saturday night. I mean, that is so lopsided.
I don't. I'm sure the league, when they realigned everything, didn't expect that to happen.
Well, but I mean, their realignment, if anything, you would think would have helped the East. Detroit comes over.
Right.
They get Detroit. They lose Winnipeg. I guess it did help them. Detroit has 39 points. Winnipeg has 33. So there you go. Could be even worse.
Okay, so in the East, who's your team to watch?
Well, they're not, even in the East, they're not a playoff team right now, which kind of surprises me, and that's why
I'm very surprised.
I'm going to try and watch them more. Wait, how are you surprised? You don't even know who I'm going to say.
Yeah, I do.
Well, the Ottawa Senators made a run to, the second round last year.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think they matched up very well with Pittsburgh.
No.
The Penguins kind of rolled right over them, but I don't know that Pittsburgh's necessarily that much better than them. It just wasn't a great matchup, and whatever. But you look at what Ottawa has, and to me it starts with the coach. Paul McLean.
He's a great
one of the best
coach.
coaches in the league. Bobby Ryan, who they add, he's already got 15 goals. Erik Karlsson, I still don't think he is where he was before he had his Achilles tendon sliced off.
Yeah, he's one of the top point getters on the team.
But he's got 30 points. He leads the team in points right now. I think he's getting there. Last year he was nowhere near it. This year he's back. Jason Spezza is back and healthy. He's got 28 points. Guys like Mika Zibanejad, Kyle Turris have been better. Clark MacArthur, boy, I bet you wish you still had him in Toronto. Not to open up any wounds, but
right.
he's been really
good.
It
was a great pickup for Ottawa.
From their rivals too. How does that happen?
Yeah.
So you look at all that, and you look at a goalie like Craig Anderson, who really hasn't been great this year. So maybe he's the problem.
No, I watched a couple of games this week, and he's just doesn't look sharp.
Remember we did that podcast over the summer about how Team USA's great chance at the Olympics was their goaltending,
Right.
and we highlighted Jimmy Howard and Craig Anderson,
Oops.
Jonathan Quick, who's hurt.
Oops.
So I don't know should we go down to a local rink here after the show and see if we can find a goalie that can play for Team USA this year? Is it gonna be Ryan Miller again?
Well, it's funny, back to 24/7. I mean, I was watching the one-on-ones with Jimmy Howard. I'm going, well, I wonder what the next episode's going to be like.
I don't know what happened to that guy, and I still do think he'll be good, partially because I dropped him off my hockey pool team, so now he has every reason to improve his life.
So I was looking at the team sitting right next to Ottawa, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the reason I think they need to be watched is
So they don't punch your goalie in the back of the head?
well, that'll be this afternoon, but
okay.
that's for the next segment. They started out 2-8 in their first 10 games.
Yeah.
And then in the first 20 games, they were 8-10-2. And now after 32 games, they're 14-15-3. So they're slowly picking away. Their captain waited 16 games before he scored a goal.
But now he is scoring.
Now he is scoring. He's 6 goals, 17 assists for 23 points in 32. It's not like he's on fire. Again, a lot like the team right now. He's clawing away, and he's getting back in. And they're only 6 points out of the second wild card spot.
And I think they're going to get it.
And they're 1 point behind Ottawa. That roster is just so deep. It really, really is. I think once their goaltending, again, here we go back to goaltending. Once their goaltending settles down a little bit, because they need Ray Emery to find his game.
I will say this, though. Steve Mason, 2.29 goals against average in 24 games.
Yeah.
And that's, I remember talking about that early in the season, those first 10, 12 games where they were losing, but they were getting good goaltending from Mason,
right,
which is what made it so weird.
Because they weren't getting any scoring. I mean, you're supposedly, quotations in air, top scorer, Claude Giroux, doesn't score for 16 games.
Yeah, he's got 23 points on the season now. But he's also the only Flyer with 23 points, and I'll just bring it back to the Coyotes because I know this stat because I heard it last night. The Coyotes, who I think a lot of people nationally think of it as a team that doesn't produce a lot of offense, they have 7 20-point producers already. Philadelphia has 1. So that shows you, A, the Coyotes have been very offensively sound this year, but also that the Flyers can still improve quite a bit. And that's why I do think that that's going to be a team that, boy, if they don't make the playoffs, there's going to be some real problems. But I think they're on the right path now, finally. And Philadelphia and the Rangers were 2 teams in the East that started very slowly, and you look at their roster and you're like, there's just no way that those teams don't make the playoffs. It's looking more and more like one of them might actually miss the playoffs, and actually they're both out of it still right now. But Philadelphia is going in the right direction, whereas the Rangers are still trending down. That's weird.
I don't think you're going to. Right now, just my gut feeling is I don't think you're going to see anything out of the Rangers.
I can't believe that.
I can't believe that either, but at least teams like Ottawa and teams like Philadelphia, they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I still tend to believe that the Rangers, Philadelphia, and Ottawa all make the playoffs. Boy, you know what? I'm looking at it. I don't even know if that's possible.
It's not.
Because Pittsburgh, Washington, Boston, Montreal, Detroit are essentially locks to make the playoffs. Not because of what their record is right now. I know we're not even halfway through the season. Just because I've watched hockey before, and so I can make that jump. And I think Toronto's a playoff team now, too. And that's not even accounting for Tampa Bay, who has 39 points. So, yeah, you're right. These teams, and Philadelphia is one of them, they got some work to do.
Right. A lot of work.
And that's in the East. Imagine if they were in the West.
Oh. So, speaking of the West, I'll go first. I just from watching them lately, I think the Dallas Stars are going to be that quiet team that gives everybody a run for that one of those wild card spots.
Because that's going to mess everything up if they do.
I really do. I mean, again, speaking of locks, I don't see Anaheim, Los Angeles, and San Jose getting knocked off of their perch.
No, they're in. They'll be
so
in.
Now we're down to Vancouver, Minnesota, Phoenix, and Dallas. I think those are the 4 teams that are going to battle for one of those 2 wild card spots, and I think Dallas can make a run for it. They're only 6 points out of the second spot. They're playing well of late, and that roster has talent as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this in the past on this show, or in the past on the show, but if Dallas just picks a plan and sticks with it, I think they're going to be
But I
dangerous.
think you're seeing that with Lindy Ruff.
Yeah, you are.
He's, we joked about it during the summer, but he's a solid coach, and he's a lot like, well, he re, he's a veteran coach that knows I got to put something in place, get all the guys to buy into it, and we don't waver. And I think that's settling in. And I think the other big thing that's going to help these guys is Kerry Lettinen is in a groove.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he's not letting in goals, and I would have just dropped the headset and left.
I would.
Yeah, you wish you could go back.
Oh,
And,
I wish I could go back.
the only reason I even said it was so you never go back and say it.
No, I think he's playing well.
He is playing well, and he's been playing well really the last couple of years, but the players in front of him have been inconsistent. The addition of Tyler Seguin is amazing to me that they were able to get him. He has 31 points on the year. Jamie Benn has 28, and at least lately they've been running with those two together on a line with the rookie, Valerie Nichushkin, who has 16 points now in 30 games. And by all accounts, he was a guy
doing better than Yakupov.
Well, yes, by every account he is. He's a plus 10. Yakupov's a minus 20. Nichushkin, I'm calling him Nichushkin. I don't care how. I don't know why other people are pronouncing his name Nichushkin. I like Nichushkin. It's got more power to it. Ovechkin. Nichushkin. Yeah. So,
at least he's not a love.
it's true. He was a guy coming into the draft that people said, scouts, not just random people on the street, said this guy could end up being the best player in the draft. There's just teams that are going to pass on him because of the whole KHL dynamic to it.
Right.
Dallas got him at 10. I think that they're very fortunate to get him at 10, and it's paying off already.
Yeah, but you got some names on this roster. You got Eric Cole. You got Ray Whitney. You have Sergei Gonchar. You have Alex Goligoski. I mean, it's hard to say, but these guys are solid players. And you got a solid coach, and you got some solid goaltending going on right now. I think Dallas is a team to keep an eye on. I really do.
They're a team to keep an eye on, but they are a team that I think ultimately misses the playoffs, and here's why. Not because they're 6 points back, but because the 9 teams that are there's a gap right now between the top 9 and the bottom 5 in the Western Conference. And Dallas is that team that's about to bridge that gap, it looks like. But if you just look at the top 9 teams, Chicago, St. Louis, Colorado, Minnesota, Anaheim, LA, San Jose, Vancouver, Phoenix, one of those teams is going to miss the playoffs, even if Dallas doesn't make the playoffs. So who misses? And for some odd reason, and this is not meant to disrespect Colorado at all, I still look at them and say, well, they're the youngest. Maybe they're the most prone to kind of going in a slump. You can't go in any slump right now. Because 2 weeks ago, Vancouver was the team that was on the outside looking in that group, and they've won 7 in a row.
You think Colorado's going to fall out of the top of the Central?
I think fall out of is not a fair way to put it. I think 8 teams are going to finish ahead of them, and I think they're all going to have over 100 points.
Wow. I don't know.
I get the.
They've got such a great start to the season. The wheels would really have to fall off.
Well, they wouldn't have to fall off that much. Here, okay, which one of these teams do you think misses the playoffs so Colorado can get in? Chicago? St. Louis? You just stop me when I get to one. Anaheim, LA, San Jose. There's 5 right there that are locks for the playoffs. I think Phoenix and Vancouver are going to the playoffs. So if Phoenix and Vancouver go, you're only getting 3 teams out of the Central. So that means either Colorado, Minnesota, or Dallas probably gets in and the other 2 don't.
Wow. I don't feel that. I'm not basing it on numbers or anything, but I don't feel that because in the Central, you got Minnesota, Dallas, Nashville, Winnipeg. One of those 4 teams has to do better than Colorado for Colorado to drop out of the top 3
That's true.
In the division.
Minnesota's tied with them right now.
So I don't like. That's why I go back to Colorado would really have to mess up bad. I mean, Minnesota's right there with them. Minnesota could knock them out of 3rd spot, depending on how the rest of the season goes.
Messing up bad in the West is losing 3 games in a row.
Yeah, it's true. It's such a tight, but boy, oh boy. I mean, you've got Minnesota, Dallas, Nashville, Winnipeg. I just said that one of those 4 teams has got to make Colorado lose that 3rd spot in the Central because I think that's the only way that Colorado doesn't make the playoffs.
My inclination, the more I look at it with what Patrick Waugh has done, is that maybe it's Minnesota that misses out. But if that happens with the money that they have poured into Zach Parise and Ryan Suter, and the guys they brought over. And I mean, you're talking about a team that's 19, 11, and 5 right now. They're not doing much wrong either. If that happens, I think there could be some changes in Minnesota. I mean, that
Well,
team's built to
when
make
those
playoffs.
deals were signed, I thought it was ridiculous to begin with.
We're talking about a team that's 13-3-2 at home,
Mm-hmm.
and right now they're on the verge of not being in the playoffs in the Western Conference.
Yeah, but I mean, I look at Colorado. I mean, they're 10-5-1 at home and 11-4-0 on the road, and they're a plus 15 goal differential.
Well, either way, I would say it's one of those two. Which brings me to my long-winded point. It's not Vancouver who's going to miss the playoffs. I don't think John Tortorella lets that happen. They've won 7 in a row. They seem to kind of be finding their way under a new coach. No matter who the coach is, you have to get used to
No
him.
disrespect to the Wild, but I think if one of those teams is going to miss the playoffs, it's the Wild.
Well, somebody very good is going to miss the playoffs.
Well, I think that's the whole Western Conference in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that conference is so good. A really good team is not going to make the playoffs from the Western Conference.
Yeah, it's unavoidable. And in a way, that's great. As an onlooker, that's fantastic. But some fan base is going to have the weirdest end of the season where they're going to have mixed emotions.
How can we get 99 points and not make the playoffs?
Yeah. And then you're going to have to. What's going to be interesting is, let's say it is Minnesota and they miss the playoffs and they finish with 99 points. Do you really turn around and say, we got to make changes? You had 99 points.
Yeah.
I mean, at a certain point, you just got to say, yeah, maybe that's just the way it fell this year.
Well, it would be nice if both conferences had that kind of parity.
Yeah, well, someday. You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey Podcast for even more hockey news.
Hashtag do it.
Final segment, news and notes. Let's start with the game that has the potential to have plenty of fireworks this afternoon. Philadelphia Flyers and the Washington Capitals.
This afternoon, I hope that it's just a good hockey game.
Well,
I hope that everybody learned how stupid they looked when they first met. I really do. I mean, I didn't mean that in, a real mean way. I just...
he meant it in a nice, encouraging way. You look stupid.
Well, I mean, they just didn't put their best foot forward, and it looked bad on the teams. It looked bad on the league. I'm just like, that's not how you play hockey. It's not how you do it. I mean, we beat up Ray Emery for his shenanigans in the first game that I don't think it should repeat. I'm hoping that these guys are mature enough and old enough to leave it behind them where it belongs.
Yeah, and Ray Emery has not gotten into any trouble since that game.
Nope.
So I do think it'll be in the past. However, just to be safe, starting in net for Washington, not Braden Holtby, it's Philip Grubauer. And for Philadelphia, not Ray Emery, Steve Mason.
Which, you know what? There's the maturation I'm talking about. The organizations realize, look, let's not give the media anything to talk about. Let's not have the media ask those questions before the game. Here's our starting goaltenders. And, it kind of puts a damper on it before the game even gets underway. And like I said in the segment prior to this, Philadelphia is starting to claw back into the standings. They can't afford not to be ready and focused to beat number 8.
Well, yeah, that's basically what it boils down to. Washington's 37 points, second in the Metro. Philadelphia, 31 points, currently sixth in the Metro. But these are two teams that are going to play each other 5 times this year. Mm-hmm. Philadelphia's focus can't be and isn't on more fighting. I mean, it was clear that game, the fighting that led up to the Ray Emery thing was, we're frustrated, we need to make a statement because we see these guys, and then Emery kind of went a little too far. But, yeah, Philadelphia's focus has to be on stopping Alex Ovechkin because he scores every game.
And we realized that when that melee happened, that Philly was a very frustrated team. They weren't being very successful. And so, yes, put a man on number 8 and focus on the game, and I think you probably are going to see a really good game.
So I'm doing the math on Ovechkin right now. I believe it is now 49 goals in his last 53 games.
That's unbelievable.
And people talk about it, but not nearly as much as you would expect.
They only talked about it, and I thought about this because you've been ringing this bell for a long, long time.
Yeah, Ovechkin's agent should give me some money or something.
They only talked about him and his scoring prowess when he got the 4 points or the 4 goals the other night.
Yeah.
Since then, nobody's mentioned his name.
which is weird. It's just, I mean, that is a record. I know it's not in the middle of a season, so it's harder for people to maybe pick up on it. I mean, if we were 52 games into this season and he had 49 goals, people would be picking up on it because
Right.
nobody else would be
Right,
anywhere
right,
near him.
right.
So it's broken up over 2 seasons. Last year was a weird year and everything, but I don't care. Those are unbelievable numbers. We talked about this earlier. Look at the guys that have done 50 goals in 50 games. I think it's only 3 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking the Wayne Gretzky's of the world.
Right.
And that was a different era where it was, like it or not, a little bit easier to score. The flip side, Philadelphia was 3-9 after that loss to Washington on November 1st, where everything went down. They are now 14-5-3. So they've gone, 11-6-3 since then, which is not amazing, but considering what they were doing, they have definitely responded since then.
Right. So now they can't jeopardize that.
No.
So the injury bug for Pittsburgh continues to haunt them.
Chris Letang, upper body, they don't know how long yet.
Day to day.
Day to day, but I mean, as we've seen in
He
the past,
skated, though.
That's a good sign.
He did skate Saturday. He just didn't play.
I'm a little more concerned for number 71 on the Penguins.
Yeah, I saw him. It was on a back check, and he fell awkwardly into the boards behind the net. And he did get up on his knees, but he had to be escorted off because he couldn't put any pressure on his left leg.
I just watched it again. Like, fell awkwardly makes it sound like he was in a bed of tulips and, I slipped. He slams full speed, and it is awkwardly as accurate.
Right.
And he just lays there. I don't know what the trainer's doing for the first 20 minutes, but they go to help him off the ice.
He was there for a whole period?
Yeah.
Okay.
They just played around him.
All right.
They go to pick him up, and he starts to walk off the ice and just falls again, which is not a good sign.
It's not a good sign.
It's not the same injury that Steven Stamkos had, but it is very similar in that he's racing back to back check, and then he doesn't hit the post, he hits the wall. But I mean, that's a big guy.
So
And
on
came back
another tangent,
quickly,
which is another reason why I like the hybrid icing.
Well, yeah. I mean, that obviously couldn't prevent this play, but I agree. I hear what you're saying.
Because that's hopefully going to allow guys to go hard, but know in the back of their mind that it could be waved off or whatever, and they're not going to get hurt. Because usually that's where that type of accident would happen, is a race for the puck on an icing. This wasn't the case. It was just a good back check, and the bodies met, and then he went down, and then he went, bam, into the boards.
Which is frustrating as a Penguins fan because it's not like Malkin doesn't play any defense, but to see him back checking that intensely.
Right. I mean, now you're going, no, he's never going to do it.
Well, yeah, A, he's never going to do it again. But B, if you watch the Penguins a lot, when he plays like that is when he's scoring a bunch of points, and he's been scoring a bunch of points, so it doesn't shock me that he did that.
I give you a hard time about the Penguins all the time because you're a Penguin fan, and my oldest son's a Penguin fan.
And that's the kind of
so
guy you
I
are.
hear about it all the time. But it amazes me over like the last 3 seasons, the injuries that this team faces.
Yeah.
And they still play and find success.
Yeah, you can look at that team one of two ways, and I just saw a different angle of the Malkin thing, and I'm no doctor, but I don't think he's playing anytime soon.
That's not good.
The other angle is much worse. Hopefully I'm wrong. You can look at the Penguins 2 different ways. You can say, look at the talent on that roster. It's kind of a disappointment they've only won 1 Stanley Cup. Not yet, but if they go another 3 years without, and they have 1 Stanley Cup from this era.
But they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, but you're going to look back. Hockey's going to look back on Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin.
Be a Toronto fan. Don't even make the playoffs.
I understand that. But if Toronto had Malkin and Crosby, you don't get players like this. So Pittsburgh went through 10 years of awful. There's going to be more years of awful in the future. You got to cash in when you have these guys.
Yeah, but still, I mean, one of those players that was hurt for a very long time was Sidney, and the team still found success.
Well, that's
what I'm
that's
saying
the
is
flip
that
side.
This organization right now, with the people that they have in place, starting from the front office to the bench, they're doing the right things. Even when a guy like James Neal is out or Sidney Crosby's out, now Malkin's out, we don't know how long or what the extent of the injury is, they will still find a way to succeed.
I'm going to try to dig up the numbers for next week's show. I don't know if anybody's done this yet. But I want to know how many games in the last 6 years
they've missed due to injury.
Well, that I can find, but I want to know, when have we had Malkin and Crosby and Letang
healthy
at the same time?
Right.
And James Neal, since he got there. I mean, James Neal gives them a huge boost. Like I said, a 40-goal scorer. But if he's healthy, Malkin's out. Or if Malkin's healthy, then Crosby's out. Letang has been out a lot. Crosby at least is there now.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of been the constant. But yeah, so the flip side too, if people want to complain they've only won one Stanley Cup, and I think that'd be more of a looking back and be like, how'd that team only win one?
Well, I'm a Toronto fan. I'd like to win a Stanley Cup.
I'm sure you would. The flip side would be they haven't actually had their team for the last 6 years.
Okay, so I got a question for you.
All right.
Tuukka Rask. What do you think of him as a goaltender?
I think of him coming into the season, I thought of him as one of the three best, and the other two, one's hurt and one's not playing very well.
So, did you see the goal from center ice on him?
I have now seen that goal, and it's weird because Jonathan Quick has given up similar goals as well. I don't know what it is.
For those of you that haven't seen it, Jannik Hansen of the Canucks comes across center ice. He was maybe 2 strides over the red line, fires a shot. Chara is in position as a good defenseman would be at the blue line. The puck hits his stick at the blue line, like the blade of his stick, goes up. Rask sees it, but then it drops like a knuckleball and into the net from center ice. I mean, it's just one of those fun things that will happen in a hockey game from time to time.
Well, fun if you're not
Tuukka Rask.
That was the kind of night that it was for Boston. I think they lost 6-2, right? That was the final.
Yeah, Vancouver took it to him.
Brad Marchand. Talked about it last week. The guy is an instigator and a pest. If he's not playing your team, he's fun to watch, though. He was pantomiming kissing his Stanley Cup ring last night to the Vancouver bench and then hoisting the cup as they lost 6-2.
They lost 6-2.
So,
and I just want to finish on one note. We talked about it, the junior rosters last week, and we made the comment, how come Canada hasn't invited more players to its camp?
and now we know.
And now we know, because the guys they invited to camp is their roster, and those are the guys that they're taking to Europe. One of those guys is a young man by the name of Connor McDavid. So if you're a hockey fan, you don't necessarily have to be a Team Canada fan, but look for that name and look for him during the World Juniors. He's 16, and he's going to the World Juniors.
And they've been talking about him since he was 13.
Right.
So you probably have already heard his name, but you probably haven't seen him play. I'm just going back through my head. When is what players do you remember hearing about when they were that young? Because for me, I can think of two guys that stand out that, and this is obviously just in the last 20 years for me. I'm sure people knew about Gretzky before he ever broke in or whatever. But guys that you hear about when they're 14, the only other two guys I can think of are Sidney Crosby and Jason Spezza. For some reason, I knew about that guy when he was 14, and he's good. He's had an excellent career, and he's still in the thick of it.
Some guys live up to it, some guys don't live up to it. Sidney clearly lived up to it, and he was the last 16-year-old to play for Team Canada back in 2004.
Eric Lindros, we heard about him when he was really young, too.
Yeah, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, that's a whole different podcast.
I still have sour grapes about Mr. Lindros.
Oh, we're going to get into that next week. Turn this into like a therapy session for you. That's it for episode 27. Join us next week as we close in on the World Junior Championships and work our way towards the Winter Classic.
And hopefully Luke will have watched at least the first episode of 24/7, because I will have watched both episodes 1 and 2.
Multiple times. Plus, whatever else happens in the next 7 days, thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.